welcome to the show. We are here today on Forza Motorsport with another relay race. Now, the way these work, you haven't seen one of these before, is we're in teams of 4 and each car has to complete a lap. This time around, we were doing a PI limited one. So you had 2,500 PI to spread over your 4 cars. Now, you couldn't go higher than R class, but what it meant is that, for example, you could use something like this Lamborghini, but that would use up a lot of PI. So for every high PI car you use, if you use an R class, you would then have to have another car on your team running a much lower class, something like this MG, for example. So it made your vehicle selection very, very important. Did you try and balance your vehicles out evenly between the PI between all of your cars? Do you have some very fast ones but have some slow ones, have sort of medium fast but not quite as slow ones? A whole load of different strategies could play out, and all 4 teams went very different ways. There was a little bit of a jump start actually from Green Team, but they kind of rectified it. Our first race, we would head to the Nürburgring GP circuit. Now, Yellow Team had gone for a completely even split of their PI. That meant 625 across all 4 of their cars, which was a lowish A class. Orange Team, we'd gone the complete extreme option of 1 R class, 1 S class, and then an D class and a C class car. My MG being the slowest of all of them down in D class, knowing that while I was going to be slow at the start, we'd be very quick later on. The Wooden Team and the Green Team, yes, we have peculiar colours and team choices and whatnot, had gone for a little bit more middle of the road strategies. The Wood Team had got a fast S class car, but then they had sort of slower B class cars and the like. Now, the strategy for Orange was very much a case of, well, we weren't going to actually be battling anybody on track. Another important aspect of these relay races was the order you send your cars out in. You don't want similar PI cars together, you don't want them getting stuck in battles, you don't want them costing each other time. Now, that wasn't a problem for us. We sent out, well, me with the MG. There's a top D-class car, and it was going to run around on its own. Now, of course, the downside of this strategy is you are putting a lot of work on your S-Class and your R-Class cars later on. So, the first handover. There are a couple of replay issues with vehicles with liveries not loading. We'll do our best. Yellow Team, they would hand over, so it didn't matter what order really they ran their cars in. They were all lowish A-class cars. They were all identical PI. The Amira would be the next vehicle to go. So they were just sending that off. So yeah, they're just all A-class cars. Now, Green Team, they were sending out their fastest car. They hadn't quite gone as extreme as Orange Team, as my team with this one, but they did have an R-class car. It was a lower PI R-class car in the Silvia Silhouette vehicle. So there's nothing that it was Ewan here driving the Amira. There's nothing that they can do about. I say you can't really do anything about defending against an R-class car. What you can hope for is to slow down the Silvia a little bit. If it catches you in an awkward place, which it does, it was Gliska driving the Nissan. Thought about or tried to get to the inside, couldn't quite get it past. Has to go around the outside, and we'll get the move done there, and we'll clear the Lotus and then drive off into, in the distance a little bit here. But it lost a little bit of time. It got stuck behind the Lotus for a couple of corners. Now, this was for Orange Team. Livery didn't load, unfortunately, in the replays, but it was Shadow driving the Opel Kadett. Now, both my car, it was D-Class, Shadow's that was a kind of mid-ish C-Class car, we were lower PI than anything else. Both of these cars were lower PI than anybody else in the field, which meant we were falling further and further back. That was okay, because we had very quick cars coming later. Either way, back to the front of the race. At this point, Orange Team were a little bit irrelevant. Green Team would hand over with the lead. Now, they would send off a Corvette. That was a very low B-class car, I believe. The Yellow Team would hand over the RX-3s on Yellow Team. Again, that's the other one the livery didn't load. That was an A-class vehicle, again, the 625. And the Wooden Team would hand over. Now, the Wood Team were holding their S-class car in reserve, so they had another low, I think it's a low B class, this BMW. So again, everybody was fairly well spread out at this stage. There wasn't a huge amount of on-track, I say, craziness to go on. In theory, the RX-3 would be closing in at the front. This was the thing to watch out for, because Orange Team had some really really quick cars to come. The Donkavort, this was driven by Rusky. This was an S-Class, top of S-Class Donkavort here. Very, very quick machine to try. But it's got a huge gap now. It's got an absolutely massive gap to try and make up for. And these cars are difficult to drive when you start getting to the S-Class cars and whatnot. Those do start to become a bit awkward to drive, so you can't afford any mistakes with your high-powered, with your fast vehicles. Up at the front, and it was continuing to lead for Green Team. The Yellow Team's RX-3 was quite a handful to drive, and it struggled to really make much of an impact, much of a gain against the Corvette as it would round the final corner. And then we head to the last of the changeovers. Green Team would hand over with the lead of the race. They had a B-class, I think it was top B-class car to go, the Brabham. It would be Yellow Team handing over to a Datsun. Again, that's still a 625. The Donkavort had charged down and passed the Wooden Team's BMW. Now, Wood Team would hand over to an S-Class car. It was a quick car. It was quicker than the other two at this point, but it wasn't quicker than the Formula 1 car. Yes, we had a Ferrari Formula 1 car. Now, Dangerman was driving our Ferrari. It did have modern slick tyres put on, and then as much ballast as possible. Basically, we wanted to put as much ballast on it as we could to drop the PI as much as possible for our lower PI cars to, well, be a little bit faster. And Rusky did a great job with the Donkavort, had closed in, had got closer to the pack, and it would now be Dangerman's job to try and chase down the others. The Datsun was not going to stand a chance against the Ferrari, and sure enough, the Orange Team would take their chance and move themselves up into a second spot. It was Longbow leading the way with the Brabham here, and this thing very, very fast in a straight line, a bit of a handful through the corners, but it did not have a big enough lead. That Formula 1 car was closing and closing, and as fast as the Brabham might have been in a straight line, it's not going to be able to outmatch or outrun the Ferrari. It's around the outside. I mean, it's a good pass, but the Ferrari's just got so much grip. It doesn't matter. The Ferrari, if it waited there, it would have just blasted past the Brabham as soon as it got onto the next straight, and it would be the Orange Team that would go on to take a victory in this. I say a relatively comfortable victory, actually, in all of this. We stayed out of trouble early on. No one made any mistakes with these quick, some of them quite difficult to drive cars, and it would be victory for us. Dangerman taking the Ferrari home in all of this. For the Green Team, they would come home in second place with that Brabham. The Wood Team, as I said, they had their fastest car last. Things weren't looking great for Yellow Team, despite not really being any big issues or any big problems during this round. Yellow Team's middle-of-the-road strategy had not quite worked out here. The Ferrari, driven by Ninetales, would be, I say around the outside, would be faster in a straight line than Brazen's little Datsun. It tried to get off the chicane quite nicely, but it's not quite going to match the Ferrari. But it was a fairly big. I mean, you can see the green car up here. You can see the Ferrari actually just crossing the line. You can see the gaps, quite sizable in this one. So yeah, there we go. The Brabham would cross the line in second place. Ninetales would cross in third with the Ferrari for Wood Team, and Yellow Team would end up at the back. So, an interesting first race. The extreme gamble that we took with our Orange Team cars had worked so far. Now, for the next race, we went off to Silverstone, and we decided to brave things, running in a different order. Normally, it is advantageous to have a fast car right at the end. We decided to go for send out our quickest vehicles first and hope they could build a big enough gap. It's always a bit of a scary one. It does, well, I say it puts a lot of pressure. You've always got a lot of pressure with these to not make any mistakes and so on. But yeah, the slow cars, especially our team having such slower cars, were going to be completely powerless to fight at the end of all this. Now, we sent out our fastest car. The Wooden Team also sent out their F50, which was their fastest car. So we were both trying to make the gap early on, and because they were still different in speed, they weren't going to be stumbling over one another. Now, Green Team and Yellow Team had gone for a little bit of a more similar strategy. So Blakey's RX-3 here was the quicker car. It was an A-class, while Impega's Porsche was B, but it was a low A-class and a high B-class, which put them relatively close together. And the RX-3 had a lot of straight line speed, but it was a handful through the corner. It wasn't very easy to get it around the turns, and the RX-3 struggled to find a way past. It would catch up down every straight, and then would go through, for example, Maggins and Beckett's here, where the the RX-3 would just lose a whole bunch of time, not quite able to carry the speed through here that the Porsche could, and then would be out onto a long straight. And now suddenly you can see the gap that the Porsche could make through that section. Now the RX-3 is going to use its power and it's going to reel in that Porsche something crazy all the way down the straight, but it's not going to be close enough to be having a look into this next section. The Porsche is able to carry the speed a little bit wide this time, but yeah, the Porsche can simply carry the speed and stay ahead for now. So, changeover. I mean, Orange Team, of course, changed over with a huge lead. We drove off into the distance. Our Donkervoort was going next. Wooden Team changed over. Green Team would change over with, you know, a successful leg of the relay, if you like. They'd managed to actually beat a car technically faster than theirs, but they were sending out their Sylvia now to go and try and build a gap. The yellow team were continuing, you know, as with the same PI. Once again, we found ourselves, and this is how it often goes with the relay, how you kind of want to plan it, everybody running around a little bit on their own. It's the goal. You don't want to be slowed down if you can help it. Now, of course, the green team vehicle, that Sylvia, was going to be very quick, and in fact, theoretically, would be closing a little bit of the gap towards our Donkervoort. The Sylvia, not crazy amount of PI. I think it's only about sort of 15, 16 PI higher. The Donkervoort is technically in a higher class, but still, it was going to be making up some ground. Now, they were coming against Wooden Team's slowest car, which, I mean, the speed differential through Maggots and Beckets is, it's a scary thing, and that is not a place you want to find a car. You really don't want, it's a big speed differential for a low B class against, you know, a low R class car. The Sylvia are incredibly quick, and you can't afford, you don't want to get stuck like for even one corner at Maggots and Beckets. It's going to cost you a huge amount of time with your quick car, but Gliska did a good job of getting it past and would carry on the march. Now, it would come time for the handover. Orange Team, as you would expect, had built that huge gap up at the front. That was the entire goal here, but of course we now had scary thing. You were seeing some people trying to warm up tyres, though it's very difficult to do because the tyres cool down so quickly in this that it wasn't really advantageous. So, Orange Team would transition, would hand over with the lead of the race, but the C-Class Cadet and D-Class MG were all that was left to go, and we had to hope that this was a big enough gap, because we were now going to be massively outclassed by one or two classes for the rest of the vehicles. It was a gamble. The goal was, hopefully, that the Donkervoort Ferrari had lovely clean runs, so it was, you know, as good an opportunity as we were going to be getting. Green Team had a couple of their B-Class cars left. The Corvette, the slower of the two, would be sent off next, as around the final corner would come the Wooden Team. They would send off their BMW, and Yellow Team, I mean, so Yellow Team were at the back, but their two remaining vehicles were pretty damn fast. So they were, I mean, Yellow Team technically at this stage had the two fastest cars to go, but they were a fair way back. So they were going to have to now make up a big margin. And it wasn't like when we did it with Orange, you know, we had the Formula 1 car trying to make up a big margin. They were trying to do it with A-class cars. At this stage, no one really knew. No one was really sure how this one was going to to be panning out. Once again, everybody was spread out on the circuit, which was helpful for running, you know, a clean lap time, keeping yourself out of trouble. The Yellow Team gradually, well, already at this stage, starting to catch up to that wooden car. The Orange Team, the Cadet, was leading the way and pushing hard, got a little bit too brave through Maggots and Beckets and found its way onto the grass. Got away with it. You'll lose a little bit of time. The curbs around that section are pretty nasty. Cadet got a bit launched up onto two wheels, a little too much speed through that section. Little bit of time lost. Not the worst, though. Not the worst thing that could happen. Exactly the same place. Green Team also pushing hard with the Corvette here. Again, another one carrying a little bit too much speed. Not quite as bad as the Cadet, but still, you kind of end up out of position. You end up out of sync for the next section. And yeah, you can, even with, you know, the lower class cars, you still got to be pushing very, very hard. Yellow team would catch the wooden BMW, and it was again through Baggers and Beckett's. We saw more action this time around. It was the Amira going for the spectacular overtake. Ewan able to find a way past Aaron in this one and move the yellow team up a position, which was helpful. Yeah, another brave pass through that section, which you said you've got to do it. You can't afford to lose that second. You can't afford to lose even a corner being stuck behind the slower car if you are wanting a chance to be winning. So the final handover during this relay race, Orange team, we would have a nice big lead. But of course, we had a D-class car. We had a D-class car that was going to get chased down by a B-class car and two A-class cars, which was a scary prospect. And I knew I needed a good run in all of this, as the rest of the field would come round. Green team would hand over. Now, Green team had the lowest PI, the remaining cars. They would hand over to the Brabham, but Brabham was very fast in a straight line. Yellow team would hand over to their Corolla. Much better handling was the Toyota, but yeah, not as fast in a straight. As I said, it's about, well, it's 25 PI higher than that. So it is technically in the class above it. It is theoretically a little bit of a faster car, the Toyota, but it's not by a drastic amount. Unfortunately for Wooden team, technical difficulties would see the RX-7, we'll say, break down and end up out of this one. I was pushing on, you can see, I was pushing on with the MG. I might have had, I think about 115 horsepower or something like that in this car, but I was trying to get the absolute most out of it, and we still had that big lead, but I have very little straight line speed compared to the other cars. I knew I had to have a very, very good lap in this if I was going to stay ahead, because these two were both, of course, going to be hunting, both going to be catching me. But it was a similar sort of battle that we had seen so far today. In fact, we'd seen it between yellow and green team earlier, only this time the roles were reversed. Yellow team's Toyota was much quicker through the corners on the most part than that of the Brabham. The Brabham a little rocket ship down the straight, so Grumples could get the Corolla out of Maggis and Beckett's well, but Longbow's Brabham would then power away. And in the distance, you can see there's a certain orange car. There's a certain orange car that was getting very, very scared as, well, these two were closing in. What would help me is Grumples is now looking for a way past. The Brabham struggles to get the car off the corner. The more they fight each other, the better it is for me. The Toyota's to the outside heading into this final section. The Brabham's going to try desperately to defend through here as they go side by side. The Corolla's stuck on a wide line and a big slide for the Toyota. It's good news for Orange team as the Corolla's still struggling. The MG is going to take victory. The Brabham desperately tries to outrun the Corolla to the line. It is very, very close, in fact, as Grumple's really struggled with grip around that final corner. It's an incredibly close finish. In fact, we had to go back to the replay, but it would just go the way of Yellow team. Then that is how close it was. After all 4 laps of race, that was the difference. Yeah, big slide from the Corolla out the final corner almost cost it the second place. Truth is, even if they hadn't been battling each other, I'm not sure they would have quite got to the MG, but that was a lot closer around at Silverstone. It was a hell of a lot closer to beating Orange. Yeah, they did slow each other a little bit down in that final sort of couple of corners. I don't think it was quite enough to have stopped them getting victory for our third and final race with this rule set, if you like. We'd change around the running orders a little bit more once again. It'd be Wooden team that would send out the technically fastest car, although between the RX-7 and the Datsun wasn't a crazy big difference. The RX-7 a higher PI A-class car, the Brabham would go. Now, this at Spa was a concern for Orange team. We went back to our original strategy of sending out the slowest cars first, but none of our cars were set for this. The Brabham, for example, here, for a B-class car, has a lot of straight line speed. Brazen's Datsun, actually, also a lot of straight line speed. Okay, Stevie's RX-7 was higher PI in all of this, but it was certainly matching. And all of Orange team's cars were terrible for straight line speed. We were all handling, essentially. The RX-7, as we run down the Camel Straight, would get itself to the inside, try and outbrake that Datsun as they would go side by side. Now, this is, of course, great news for Orange Team, and it's great news for Green Team as well, actually, because at the end of the day, they've got a B-class car against some higher PI vehicles that stay in closer. The more they fight, the better it is for the rest of us. The Datsun doesn't go up the inside, struggles to pull it up in time down here. I mean, the Datsun is very quick accelerating, decent top speed, but it is a bit of a handful through the corners. Couldn't quite get a move completed through there. It's still looking as we now run down the hill. There'll be no sight of an orange car anymore. Turns out the MG could do about 114 miles an hour, and that was it. Sprays into the inside once more. There's a little bit of leaning going on against the Mazda as they fight each other. It's a great little battle. It's a great battle here between the pair of them. The Mazda's now going to think about trying to get to the inside. Couldn't quite do it. Didn't quite get out of the sort of slipstream in time. Gave the Datsun a little bit of a bump. And again, we're back to going side by side through this next section. The Datsun almost sliding on the exit of the corner, but not quite. The Mazda having to settle and follow it through the next section. The Datsun, big wiggle. And as I said, great news for the Brabham that not only gets a front row seat to watching all of this, but it's staying much closer as they are fighting each other. And there's probably, some of this section not great for the Brabham, but its straight line speed should help through some of it. The Mazda would finally get itself to the lead of the race. For now, of course, there's a lot going to change as the race goes on. The scary Datsun out a little bit wide through there, but as they all break down for the final couple of corners, it was going to be the Mazda that will come out of it, or come out of the final turn with the lead of the race. However, as we were going to go for the changeover, the wooden team would cross the line with the lead of the race, although they would immediately transition into a slower car, and yellow would retake it. Green team would send off their next vehicle, one of their slower cars here in the Corvette. Again, they'd been relatively unopposed for this one and stayed close to the battling pair up at the front, which was all very, very good news for them. They had faster cars coming later on in the list of this. For Orange Team, I mean, you could see the size of the gap. The MG wasn't very fast, and it wasn't really going to get much better. The the Cadet wasn't a particularly straight speed car. The Doncavor was quite, severely top speed limited. The Ferrari also wasn't really a speed car. So we knew this was going to be a difficult one. We expected this one was going to be a difficult one for us. And one of the things that you did have to bear in mind with this is, of course, because the cars are setting off, cold tyres, it was genuinely a thing. Shadow was desperately trying to warm the tyres up on the Cadet. And with some of the very powerful cars that some of the teams were running, they could be a bit sketchy. So trying to get the tyres warmed up when you go do a Rouge and Radillon sort of full throttle, or not going to be flat necessarily, but when you're trying to go maximum attack through there, it is you want to get your car working, and it never will be quite how you want it on this first lap. After an exciting start to the race, it has to be said, yellow team were leading the way. The wooden BMW was sat in second. Everyone had sort of spread themselves out back into the more usual routine. A big slide from the wooden car there, actually, as it came across the line. Yellow would send off their Corolla up next. The wooden team would now send out their quick car. They would set the Ferrari F50 off. Its goal was going to be to catch and pass the yellow team and build a big enough lead. That was going to be the plan for the wooden team in this one. I say a theory in all of this. Now, while all of that was going on, our Doncavor was going to be set off, and that had a lot of work to do, funnily enough. There became a mess at turn one. We were trying to, I don't even know what was going on. They were stacking cars. I don't know if they were trying to get them over the wall, but this is the holding area when everyone had finished their race, managed to balance a Brabham and a Datsun, and it's just what happens. It's just what happens while we were all doing that. The Doncavor, that was off and on its way. As I said earlier, these cars are sketchy and difficult to drive. The Doncavor almost has a tremendous accident sliding its way over the top of Radillon. These quick cars, I mean, while team composition, if you like, it was working. It was incredibly aggressive. It was incredibly risky in some ways. much easier to make mistakes with the R-Class, the S-Class cars than, the B-Class and the A-Class stuff. Ninetales would catch up to the back of Yellow Team, as expected, really, with the Ferrari. It would try and look for a way past again and cost a little bit of time through here. The Ferrari was losing a little bit of time at this part of the track. It does get itself around the outside. Again, we're probably only talking, a couple of corners that the Ferrari was held up, but every second or so does matter in this. Grumpels did a great job with the Corolla got a little bit wide, actually, coming out onto this section, but on the most part, it was done a good job. The Ferrari was desperately trying to make as much of a gap as it could, because, the Donkavort, funnily enough, was charging. Green Team didn't want this. Green Team were wanting to hand over at least ahead of the Orange Team, but it was not to be. While they had saved their Silvia for the end, the Silvia wasn't a match for the Ferrari. They needed to be ahead of it, and that was not to be. The Donkavort had been very fast around this circuit, so it came time for the final handover. Green Team strategy wasn't quite working in all of this. The real question now would be, could the Wooden Team be far enough ahead? It was looking difficult for them, as the Yellow's Lotus would be set off. And then we wait. We wait for the Donkavort. It was a big gap. But of course, we had a very, very fast car. Green Team also had a pretty damn rapid car. There's only about 50 PI difference between the Ferrari and the Silvia. So off would go the Ferrari down towards the first corner. A little bit of cold tyres for Danger Man sends it a smidge wide and a bit oversteering on the exit. But that's okay. I mean, it's not quite ideal, but nothing terrible has happened. The Ferrari gets going and can hopefully have some warm tyres as it heads through Eau Rouge, etc. The Lotus of Ewan was charging, and that would go after Wooden Team's Toyota, the GT86. They just hadn't got a big enough lead. It wasn't enough. The B-Class Toyota, it just was not fast enough. They got a low B-Class as well. It wasn't quick enough to do anything. Certainly wasn't far enough ahead to be able to fend off the likes of the Lotus. So now Yellow Team would have the lead. The middle of the road strategy seemingly working quite well around this circuit. But of course, they took the lead at this stage, but there was still a lot of the lap to go. And it was the ever menacing Ferrari with a bit of a slide coming out of that corner that was going to be doing the job of trying to charge down the leaders. You kind of see the Silvia a little bit in the background. That was also on the charge, naturally. It was looking like going to be trouble for that Toyota. There's not much that is going to be able to do against the might of a Ferrari. Have one car, and sure enough, it's a big dive under brakes, but that's the speed differential between the pair of them. It's a huge difference. The Ferrari can chuck it to the inside, much better brakes, much more grip in the corner, and that'll be the Ferrari up to second. And Ewan was not looking really quite far enough away for Yellow Team as we head onto the back straight. It's still got a bit of a lead. The Amira still had that little bit of a gap, but it was always looking tenuous at best as we charge down. These next couple of corners are going to be very, very, very quick. Danger Man thinks about going for a pass, opts not to. The last thing you want to do is have an accident through here, especially when you've got the faster car. There's no real need to have a crazy risk at that section. Danger Man's to the outside into the final chicane. It will be the inside for the final part, and while the Ferrari lights up its rear tyres slightly, in the end, it doesn't matter too much. The Ferrari would cross the line and take a victory. Yellow Team would come home in second. It was a dramatic finish. And to be honest, the Danger Man played it a little bit safe, but that's kind of what you got to do. The Ferrari, to be honest, the Ferrari could have come out of the final corner second. As long as it was right behind, it would have out-accelerated the Lotus anyway. So it was worth being cautious. And Green Team, while it didn't quite work out for them in terms of managing to get to the lead, to the victory, they would pass the Wooden Team. We saw a couple of passes actually around that fast corner. They were just a little bit too far back. They couldn't quite close in on Yellow Team. So it was quite an interesting mix-up around here. There we see Orange take victory, Yellow cross the line in second. That was the gap back to third. The Wooden Team strategy just didn't quite work out. Their car's obviously not quite working around this circuit as well. So, there we go. As far as strategy goes, sort of risky gamble paid off. It had worked in previous Forza games where we've done these sort of relay races, and it continued to work in this one. The D-Class MG, the sort of mid-ish C-Class Cadet were fast enough that they didn't lose too much time, so that when we unleashed the Donkervoort, when we unleashed the Ferrari, they were able to charge down. Interestingly, the other three teams, their varying strategies did sort of work at different tracks. The Orange team were really the one to beat, and while they got close at Silverstone, they got very close at Silverstone, the other two circuits, even at Spa that we thought would be the least good for Orange team, we proved to be a little bit too much. But the kind of middle-of-the-road strategy from Yellow didn't always work, but it wasn't completely useless. Green teams sort of having one fast car and a mix of sort of slower ones had its moments. I think the problem with the Green team was they kind of had a strategy along the lines of ours, only it was not quite as extreme, and if our strategy was going to work, it was always going to work way better than theirs, essentially. So yeah, Green team struggled not quite being extreme enough. Yeah, this was really interesting. It was really, I love these kind of relay races. Always fun to find and see what happens. Orange team had a good run. My MG works. We had no big accidents either, which is always helpful for these sort of races as well. That though is going to be it from me. Thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.